Hi everybody, I'm Teresa Perrin and I want to discuss with you Hellbiz and the reverse split vote filing that came out after hours. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I really believe that Hellbiz needs to get this filing under the belt and that ultimately this is a tool for them that if they don't have is going to absolutely make them continue to get demolished by shorts. However, there are things in this reverse split paperwork that are very, very ugly, and we need to talk about it. And guys, I told you when it comes to investing that I will always 100% be honest to the shareholders, my followers. And there are times when I have to bite the bullet and say things may be different than how they appear. And I'm starting to get a very I don't know if I would say bad, a very questionable instinct in my gut about the paperwork that was filed on Friday. So I'm going to be honest and disclose that to you. And I will never tell you to buy, hold, or sell any stock. So please don't ask me. This is a decision that only you can make, and realize that it could go in either direction. What the results will be, I honestly and truly do not know. However, there are red flags. So let's get started. And if you could, smash that like button for me. I have spent my entire Saturday researching, and this is just the beginning. Tomorrow I will likely be dropping more bombs. Okay, guys, at first look at this, it just seems like they're announcing a special meeting of stockholders for the purpose of a vote for a reverse split. Now, first of all, Hellbiz is in non-compliance with the NASDAQ listing department because they have not held a vote right now for shareholders, a shareholders meeting, excuse me. So by not having a shareholders meeting within a year, it puts them in non-compliance. Now, normally when companies receive this warning, I've researched this, so you know I'm not pulling out of the blue sky, but they are given up to 360 days to rectify the situation. Now, Hellbiz is in a unique position because they are non-compliant right now with their minimum market cap. They are non-compliant with the minimum share price being below $1. And they are non-compliant with not having a shareholders meeting. To be perfectly honest and clear, this is a very bad look, and it reminds me of BBIG because they also are non-compliant with not having a shareholders meeting. And the more I research this, the more companies I'm finding that are non-compliant with this. So what is going on? Honestly, guys, I have no idea, because that is the easiest requirement to meet. How hard is it to have a shareholders meeting? I don't know. But ultimately, I do believe that we need to get this reverse split vote under the belt. And that's not what I have a problem with here. Let me be perfectly clear about that. I 100% am going to say that I believe we need to get this vote. But it's a portion of what we're voting on that I have a very big problem with. So ultimately, the effect is to do a reverse stock split of the Class A common stock for an effect of 1-for-2 to 1-for-50. So guys, it could be anywhere from you losing your shares from 2-to-1 to 50-to-1. Now, ultimately, it's important to note that this doesn't change the market cap. This doesn't change the value of the shares that you hold. However, oftentimes a reverse split, especially in a company that is not yet profitable, can cause a ladder hole of more shorting, likely more naked shorting, and dilution. So that's why people do not like reverse splits. And lately, I must say, though, there have been some companies that have done well with a reverse split. However, the red flag here is not whether it'll do well or whether it won't. You know, that's very hard to predict, and I don't think anybody could predict that, easily. I will say that companies that tend to have a higher reverse split number do better because it's more difficult for them to short this down to oblivion. So that being said, I would err on the side that Salvatore would do a 25 or a 50 to 1 versus a 2 to 1, because I can almost guarantee if he does a 2 to 1, unfortunately, they are going to short it right back down. That's even if that would put him over the $1 minimum compliance. Now, going on, the big problem that I see in this is that he wants to treat the Class A and the Class B shares differently. And judging from what I read, it appears to me that in order for the Class B shares, by the way, he solely owns. So this, first off, sends a red flag because it seems very unfair to shareholders as to why would he want to do a reverse split and have all of his shareholders lose their value, and not their value, I mean, it's the same value, but lose their number of shares, yet you don't want to apply the same principle to your shares. Well, guys, I think it all has to do with voting power, but it's also making him make out like a bandit, because that would effectively, if he chooses not to reverse split the Class B shares, then guess what happens? Effectively, he increases the value of his shares by whatever the stock split is. So it's essentially like him having the equivalent of, let's say he does a 50 to 1 split, 50 times the number of shares that he owns. How is that even right? To me, I think it's borderline illegal, but that's questionable because it's disclosed. So, but personally, it doesn't instill my faith. And the only reason I could think of him doing that for would be if he fears that his predatory lending with Yorkville, which we will get into on a later video if I'm not dead tomorrow, is that maybe he thinks they're trying to do a takeover and he's trying to control the voting power. That's the only thing I could think of that would make sense for him to want to do that. But even still, that doesn't seem to be the right way to go about it, and it looks very shady. All right, in case any of you want to go and find this yourself, all you have to do is go to NASDAQ.com, just Google NASDAQ, Hellbiz, and you can pull it up. And then go to SEC filings, and you can pull up all of the filings for Hellbiz and start researching this yourself. And in fact, depending on, if you're heavily invested in these companies and you're seeing this as a long-term hold, then this is something that you need to be doing. If you're day trading the stock, then who freaking cares, right? But if this is an investment, that you need to know what you're doing and you need to follow them, so that there are times, and I always say this, when I see a red flag and it causes me to sell at a loss. And guys, sometimes that happens, and sometimes you need to look at what dilution and what red flags you're seeing and whether or not you want to continue to hold something. So that being said, I have messaged Salvatore and said that I find this absolutely appealing, and that if he wants shareholders to stand behind him, then I urge him to remove this from this filing and the shareholder vote, because this is not right, guys, by any means. And look at this right here under question. Do any of our directors or officers have interest that may conflict with the interests with respect to the proposals? Our chair and CEO, Salvatore Palella, may have interest in the proposals that differ from your interests as a holder of Class A common stock. Mr. Palella is the sole holder of the Class B common stock. Although all of the Class A common stock will be treated the same in the Class A stock split, and all of the Class B common stock will be treated the same in the Class B stock split, if the ratio of the Class A stock splits is different from the ratio in all of the Class B common stock will be treated the same in the Class B stock split. If the ratio in the Class A stock split is different from the ratio in the Class B stock split, his interest in the amendment may differ from the interest of the holders of shares of Class A common stock, as his ownership percentage of common stock could increase after the Class A stock splits and the Class B stock split, if any, keyword if any, meaning they don't have to split the Class B according to this. The proposal from the amendment requires that if the board elects not to enact the Class B stock split or elects to use a ratio for the Class B stock split that differs from the ratio for the Class A stock split, that such decision has been 1. Approved by the independent directors, and 2. Demand, together with the mandatory conversion data amendment, to be fair pursuant to a fairness opinion from an independent firm accustomed to listing such fairness opinions. Okay, guys, so basically what that means is the independent directors on the board have to decide whether or not this is okay, and that they need to get an outside opinion. Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I think that they can obtain that if they want to quite easily. Guys, this is BS because it means that his shares of Class B stock wouldn't necessarily have to split. So that means that he's going to increase his ownership, which also increases his voting power in the company. The board, in its sole discretion, may proceed with the amendment without enacting the Class B split. In that instance, the exclusion from parallel adjustments would only reference the Class A stock split. Guys, this is a problem because this is giving him way more shares. Right now, he has 14,200,000+ shares of Class B common stock. So technically, if he did a 50-to-1 stock split for us, he should have to do a 50-to-1 stock split, in my opinion, of his own shares. But according to this that we're voting on, this proposal we're voting on, he wouldn't necessarily have to do any stock split to them. And that gives him power. Let me see. I thought I brought up a table. Here we go. So, in a 2-for-1 reverse split, it would mean that the shares would become approximately 91 million shares. Now, this is based on, I think, old numbers, so it'd be a little bit higher. In a 1-for-35 stock split, it would bring us down to only 5 million shares. In a 1-for-50, it would bring us down to only 3 million shares. Now, the positive thing about that would be that ultimately, it would give us more power to squeeze the shorts. But the bad part about this is, why should the CEO not have to have effect to his shares the same way that we do? Do you see the problem? Now, here's where I think that I'm starting to come on to something. If you go down to this bottom graph here, which I'm sorry, you probably have partially cut off because of my screen. Actually, let me adjust it. Okay, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see it now. And it's like a chart that has the Class B and the Class A. Now, looking at that chart, if Class B does no stock split, and I'm going to say a 1-for-2 is probably not even on the table, to be honest with you. But if they do none, then that leaves us with only 34% voting power, but it leaves Salvatore with 66% voting power. If they do a 1-for-50, it leaves shareholders with only a 20% voting power and him with a 79.5% voting power, which essentially means, guys, he can dilute, he can do a reverse split, he can do whatever the heck he wants because he holds all the voting power. Do you see the problem here in the red flag that I am seeing? Now, if a 1-for-25 is enacted, then he actually loses some of his voting power, I believe, because we end up with 92.8 and he ends up with 7.2%. If a 1-for-50 is done, then he ends up with 86.6. No, we end up with 86.6 and he ends up with 13.4% voting power. So do you see where the enticement would be for him to enact no stock split on his shares, but a much higher 1 for 25 or 1 for 50 on ours. I don't know about you, but comment below your thoughts on this, because personally, if Monday morning a PR does not come out that he is going to change this, I'm sorry guys, I'm out. And that's the bottom line, and this is why. Because I don't care if I take a loss or not. I'll trade it, but I'm out for investing in it, because that's BS. And that you don't do that to your shareholders. I'm disgusted, to be perfectly honest with you. All right. So the rest of the vote, guys, has to do with the board having a debt conversion and some other things that are like not as important as the first article. I think the first part of it regarding the shareholder vote. You know, as far as their incentive plan and things like that, yeah, every company has them, and yeah, it is what it is. So I don't really care about that. The thing that I'm concerned about, and that screams red flag to me, is the fact of him not having to dilute, and I have a huge problem with it. So guys, it stinks to have to tell you something negative, but I'm just being real with you, and we're going to talk about in my next video what I found out with Yorkville and predatory lending. And it's not just Hellbiz, guys. It's a lot of companies, and it's sick. That's a rabbit hole and a half for you. So anyways, let me know in the comments your thoughts on Hellbiz and where you think it's going from here, because I hate to tell you, but if I were short and I saw this filing, it's no wonder it did what it did after hours. And there's another problem. If we don't maintain that minimum market cap right now, this thing will get delisted. Or it very likely could get delisted. I'm not going to say 100% it will, but it very likely could, because in order for them to enact that reverse split, then they're going to need to have a minimum market cap to stay NASDAQ compliant. So this is a big, big problem. And I think it would be in the shareholders' best interest to amend that statement. And, you know, it's up to him to do what he wants, but the only thing I could think of, guys, is that he's afraid of a hostile takeover with all of the funding that he's taken from Yorkville. And that's a very real possibility, which could be why he wants to enable he has all the voting power. Something else to think about. But again, I don't want to dig too deeply, because I've already kind of reached my conclusion as to where I stand, unless I see some major changes and things addressed. Just so you know, I have reached out to the CEO, but I have not heard back from him. So, guys, I'm trying to do what's best for us as shareholders and as retail. I really am, and it's just not looking so good right now with what I'm seeing. Sorry to tell you, it's not how I wanted to spend my Saturday, and it's certainly not what I wanted to come and tell you, but I promise you, if you follow me, then I am always going to be honest, and I promise you no one does the extensive DD that I do. Anyways, have a great night, guys.